Senator Shelley Heddleman and Delegate Vice Chair Dana Stein, and as well Delegate Lisa Balcastro, who sends her regrets because she was not able to participate tonight. She recently had a death in the family, and we all are sending our condolences to her. I am John Carden, the fourth member of the 11th District Team. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed our lives in many ways. One of the biggest changes has been how children are learning. The switch from bricks and mortar schoolhouses to virtual learning has not been easy. Parents suddenly are finding themselves in a teaching role while juggling work and many other responsibilities. You may have noticed that also that a ballot has recently arrived in your mailbox. This is because the June 2nd primary election is going to be held by mail, and it's right around the corner. Tonight, we're going to hear from experts who will provide an update and address your questions on both the election issues and the education issues. I now it is an honor to now turn it over to my colleague, Senator Shelley Heddleman, who will fill us in on the logistics of the evening.
Thank you so much, John. And thanks everybody for joining us tonight for our third District 11 Town Hall. I want to explain that questions have been submitted in advance for people who registered for the Town Hall. And we hope that we will get to all of those submitted questions. If you have questions and post them on any of our Facebook Live pages, we will do our best to get to them, but please realize that because of the interest in tonight's topics, we may not be able to do so, but we'll follow up afterwards. Right now, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Delegate Dana Stein. Thank you. Dana, I think you are still on mute. Thanks.
It always helps to unmute. That's right. So thank you, Shelley. I want to thank our distinguished panelists for joining our town hall tonight. And our panelists include Dr. Darryl Williams, who is Superintendent of the Baltimore County Public School System. He will update us on BCPS operations during the pandemic. Cheryl Pasteur, who is a board member of the Baltimore County Board of Education. Cheryl has an extensive background in the Baltimore County school system as both a teacher and an administrator, and she'll provide an update on the Board of Education response to the pandemic. And then we'll hear from Bruce Harris, who's a board member of the Baltimore County Board of Education, and will brief us on the June 2nd primary election, which is just next week, and how it'll be carried out. So without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to Dr. Williams.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you for this invitation. So my task is to give an update about, the teaching and learning in Baltimore County Public Schools. Just a little bit of history. We had to go into our continuity of learning when we were facing the pandemic as a county, as well as across the world. So phase one, March 16th through the 27th, our schools and offices were closed, where we had staff preparing for our continuity of learning that was going to take place for our kids. March 30th through April 24th was phase two, where students either had access to online resources, we call it Schoology, or packets were being mailed. And we decided to mail packets because during that time period, there was a stay-at-home executive order by our governor, and we wanted our staff and students to be safe. And then phase three, which began on April 27th, where we looked at different grade levels. Of course, our students in high school had access to technology, as well as middle school students, but we had to really take a different look at our elementary school students from pre-K to 2 and then from 3 to 5, where we had to provide two different platforms, either a packet of information or website access through Schoology. We also utilized our BCPS TV, where we had resources available for students to watch on TV. Throughout this course of schools being closed, we looked at our engagement data, those students who were accessing Schoology or participating in Google Meets. Teachers are to run sessions every week where they were meeting with students and also talking about their well-being. Not only did we have to talk about the teaching and learning, we also wanted to make sure our students were just dealing with a lot of their emotions and feelings. And sometimes we have to deal with staff as well, being closed and not having access. So we looked at those students who were logging into Schoology and Google's Meet. We also looked at when we were able to make contact with parents and of students, especially the students who were submitting work via email. So for the last 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, I apologize, we've been monitoring our engagement data. Our Schoology data looks good, a high 86% accessing Schoology. In terms of engagement data, a high 95 to 96 engagement, but we do recognize there are some students who we have not been able to engage with, and we're concerned the outreach, our work with counselors, social workers, pupil personnel workers, our administrators. We've gotten more to be engaged, but there's still a percentage of our students who are not engaged, and those are the ones that we're going to have to really think about when the summertime comes or when we are able to return back into a school building. During this time, we were able to provide breakfast, lunch, and a snack to our students, where we doubled up on Thursdays to have 2 breakfasts, 2 lunches, and 2 snacks. The calculation is that we probably fed close to or given out over 500,000 meals, and I may be lowballing it. It may be a little bit more, but the efforts of our board members, the Student Support Network, our food and nutrition services, our student leaders, actually, that we were able to increase our sites to about 68 sites, and those sites are located on our website. The big discussion has always been, particularly for the class of 2020, clearly we are unable to have a in-person graduation for the class of 2020. We did say when it's safe to do so, we're going to have some type of in-person celebration. But in the time being, as you well know, when June comes, it just feels like graduation time. So we are scheduling virtual graduations beginning June 10th, where we're running, I believe, 4 graduation ceremonies each day. We partnered with Herff Jones and our school leadership to really come up with something nice for our student leaders and students and principals and administrators to personalize as much as possible the virtual graduations. And in terms of operations, before we were literally shut down and had a skeleton crew coming in to monitor the buildings, and actually our building service workers, our nurses, groundsmen, even bus drivers were involved with supporting either the grab and go meals at those sites or helping us to disinfect and sanitize buildings and offices. At this point, we know that staff members may need to have access to our buildings, so we're developing that schedule, just like students will need to pick up belongings and return materials. Once we finalize those schedules, we'll continue to do more cleaning and sanitizing buildings, offices, and I cannot forget about our buses that we had to clean as well. And right now, we are in the process of developing a recovery plan. For me, that is those summer plans that we need to look at for all students. We know we want to do something for all students remotely. We want to do something, a summer plan for specific students, whether remote or not. But we also need to focus on students who I shared earlier who were disengaged or experiencing some challenges during the closure. And so we'll continue to work with our health department, our county executive, and additional updates from our governor, whether we can bring small groups of students back into the building during the summer. But we also got to think about what our opening of school will look like in the fall. We anticipate it will be slightly different. And we also have to anticipate if we have another spike, what we can do if we need to do remote learning sometime during this upcoming school year. So we have to look at, of course, the safety of everyone, students and staff. The operations must continue in terms of how we operate as a system. And last, but of course not least, the instruction. We have to look at our policies and our rules, really strengthen our communication to stakeholders, look at the physical plant, including transportation, the CDC guidelines around cleaning and disinfecting, utilize our nurse and health professionals. I mentioned the academics around student learning, the social and emotional well-being of our students, staff, substitutes, and volunteers, the fiscal impact. We will have to look at resources for our students and staff. And then the human resources, how do we onboard new staff members? How do we train our current staff members? Developing additional safety protocols and whatever necessary professional development. And how do we manage absences, not only of our students, but our staff? So there's a lot going on at this time. If one would think we're coming to the end because of the school year, we're ramping up. You know, we're trying to close, but we also got to plan what may happen this summer and definitely the fall, and then throughout this coming school year. So thank you for that, for this time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams, for the comprehensive update. I have a number of questions. We're not going to get to all of them, but we do have a few minutes to ask you some. So let's get right to it. What types of supports have teachers been getting? And you did talk about this a little bit already, but maybe go into a little more detail. As the schools have moved online, what kind of training and other supports have the teachers been getting?
So thank you for that. When we were closed for the first 2 weeks, we added another week where we had training for our staff for 1 whole week. And it was a quick training to try to go from, as you mentioned earlier, bricks and mortar to now this online learning. And from that, we provided training for our teachers and for our administrators. Every week, our principals are checking in with staff. They conduct remote staff meetings. We look at the needs. A lot of it is just the logistics, one trying to set up. But if we're going to continue this during the summer and the fall, there will be additional professional development we have to provide. We run the gamut from a first-year teacher to a teacher with 30+ years of service. And so the learning, we have to differentiate the learning for our staff. Some are able to grasp, and then some may have needed some additional time. But we kept in mind that circumstances at home would not be ideal because we didn't know everyone's circumstances. We didn't know who was really managing the pandemic or taking care of family members or now having their own kids at home. And so we had to do a good balance of checking in with our staff. So this is causing us to look at professional development differently, mostly online, but also we realize we have to differentiate even for our staff because some are very tech savvy and some may have needed additional support.
So, and we just got a question on Facebook, but first I'm going to ask, if somebody wants to enroll their students right now, they're looking to either re-enroll or enroll, how do they go about doing it? And you mentioned trying to go after non-engaged students. What exactly are non-engaged students? Can you define that a little better?
Sure. So those students that we are unable, teachers haven't heard from them, we've reached out, administrators have reached out, and there's no contact. We don't know exactly what's going on with that student or with that student's family. So that's how we're saying that our attempts to reach out led to no answer or no phone call back, nothing. So we're working with our staff to be a little bit more aggressive with these families. In terms of registration, we put a lot of our information on our website. So if new families want to register, there's a contact information, the Office of Pupil Personnel Workers. The number is 443-809-0404, 443-809-0404. And we realized we had to do our registration and enrollment a little bit different. So all of that, so most of it is online at this time.
Great.
Oh, you on mute.
Hello. Okay, sorry. We'll get that information out on the at the end of the presentation as well.
Okay.
Contact information. IEPs and 504 plans, how are they being implemented? Is anything being done about them now?
Yeah, so students receiving special ed services or our English language learners, we had to do and look at how we can provide some kind of continuity of learning. What's been great is that we've asked our special educators to contact each family and work with the families to review the IEP, the individualized educational plan based on our remote learning context. There's should be weekly parent contact. We had to make some adjustments to the services just because we are not physically with students. So we know, and we check in, our administrators are checking in with our executive directors and letting us know if there are complications. Of course, families can always reach out to their principal to inquire about questions, but we had to, at this time, look at our services. We don't know what the summer and the fall may bring. A lot of this is mandated by the federal government in terms of the free and appropriate education. And so we made the commitment that our educators, special educators would be supporting students. But again, the pandemic has caused us some questions because what I realized, some of our own staff members are struggling with either family members or their own children. So not only did we have to come up with plans for our special ed students, we also had to come up with plans for our English language learners, those students who are learning English. And so our ESOL teachers would be supporting the regular classroom teacher. We utilize our BCPS TV to help with that. But I think we're going to have another wave of what we can or cannot do with students receiving special ed services as we look at the fall and the start of the school year.
Thank you very much. Last question. If things don't reopen in the fall, what plans are being made in terms of virtual learning? Are you looking at some partnerships with other entities to help? What kind of tech support is going to be available to both faculty and students?
So thank you for that question. So that's a part of our recovery plan. We have to look at a variety of scenarios. What if we are still closed? What that will look like? What if we're in a certain phase of reopening and have to have small groups? What that will look like? Or if we're safe to bring in everyone, what that scenario will look like. I think for us, our situation was different from other nearby counties where we had devices for students in grades 3 to 12. That didn't mean every student brought home their device, but at least we had devices. I think moving forward, we're gonna have to look at, there's the CARES Act. We're gonna have to look at those funds to make sure students have access to whatever resources one would think of, laptop or Chromebook, Wi-Fi, hotspots. We gotta look at those resources for students and for staff if we were to go full remote learning like we're currently in. The packets, they were giving to students to help. The issue for us now is that providing feedback to students wasn't ideal for the staff, unlike what can happen on the online platform. So I think moving forward, we're gonna have to look at how we are using our CARES Act and what resources we can get for all students. And if anybody needs technology support out there, again, there's a link on our website where even if there's an issue with the device or the application, staff members are able to respond and try to get you some resources. And again, I just put a shout out to our administrators and teachers at every school building. They are very flexible and able to support many, not as well as most of our families with some of the technical issues that they're having. So kudos to the staff.
Great. Thank you. I was going to stop there. I just got one more question on Facebook, and so we'll try and do it. And maybe if you have like 30 seconds on the answer, it's about encouraging students to take AP classes. What will be changing regarding professional development so there's actual teaching happening for the fall? The concern is that an hour of online classes is not going to be enough to satisfy the AP requirements.
So we'll look at our continuity of learning plan if we have to open remotely. I think our approach will be a little bit different, knowing what kind of stage we're in. And I understand with the advanced services, the GT classes or AP classes, to start the school year versus how we finish, I see there'll be some slight changes to how we approach that.
Thank you very much. And
Sure.
we have all kinds of budget questions, but we're not going to get to them. But thank you so much, Dr. Williams. Really appreciate your time. Now I'm gonna turn it over to Cheryl Pasteur, a longtime friend and a longtime advocate for our area. Ms. Pasteur was elected as a member of the Baltimore County Public School Board of Education, representing the 2nd Councilmatic District. She'll be providing us an update on the board and how it's been operating under these extenuating circumstances.
Good evening, and it certainly is a pleasure to be here. Let me give that update about our school board. The school board has remained busy, very vigilant in taking care of the what, and which is our responsibility. As Dr. Williams has just shared, you see that staff is about the how. So it is a good thing, I believe, that we have maintained a continuity in terms of our working on the board so that our children and our system, even under these circumstances, have a feeling of that continuity. So in that regard, the school board has continued to meet on its schedule. It has continued to have our committee meetings and doing the work of each committee. The the Policy Review Committee, Contracts, the Audit Committee, Government and Legislative, and the Curriculum Committee. So all of our committees have been meeting just a little differently because we want to be respectful of our IT people. So we actually have been meeting on one day. So we have done that twice, and I anticipate that we will do that same kind of thing in June. So the work of the board certainly continues. Dr. Williams pointed out or mentioned the Student Support Network. As we work through our meals program, found that through SNAP, Free and Reduce, all of the plans that our students have been participating in, that through the CARES Act and through the federal government, that is through the federal government, it has become easier for parents to participate in any of these meal programs. And Baltimore County has done a good job of trying to make sure for a long time that we were giving our students 3 meals a day and a snack, which we then had to go to 4 meals. Did I say 3? Yes, 3 meals a day, 5 days a week. And then we had to go to 4 days. And not because we wanted to do that, but as the rest of the country was experiencing, so were we. We were experiencing difficulties with deliveries, etc. So we are at 4 days and 2 meals. So the question has been, what happens this summer? So I'll just throw that in now. We have been told that there will be an extension to the supports that we will get in terms of being able to supply meals. So that will carry us through the end of August. And we are still waiting for funds to come in from federal resources, etc. So we are hoping, that is a question that I've asked Dr. Scriven about whether we will go back, there's the possibility that we could go back to 5 days or 3 meals. So all of those things are certainly predicated on what happens in terms of the funding that will be coming to us. But we are certainly interested in making sure that our students are going to get what they really need in terms of food. And we are also taking a look at what happens, and we've been looking at this for the last year. This board, under board member Ms. Makita Scott, who brought it to our attention, that we were in the past not paying attention in terms of having an equity committee as a standing committee. So the board has voted on, and Ms. Scott, along with Dr. Lisa Williams from that office, and the Policy Review Committee, which is led by the board chair, Ms. Causey, and as I said, those of us on the board are looking at that equity committee, because we understand that what this pandemic has done, in many cases, has uncovered some of the needs of our total student body that absolutely must be addressed. They also have uncovered some of the needs of our staff. I think Dr. Williams already touched on that. And certainly when we roll back in, first with the summer and then with the fall, we're going to find that there are going to be a variety of things that students and staff, and I want to throw in parents, are going to need that possibly we had not done before or anticipated. So we look forward to the birth of this new standing committee, this equity committee. We also, during this time, are happy to be able to welcome Dr. Aaron Hager to the board. And last week was importance of good health and good nutrition for our students as they learn, because obviously if they are hungry, they are not going to learn as we want them to. So we are looking forward to Dr. Hager's contribution to our board and the working of our board. Although I think I can say for our board members, we would have loved to engaged in actual physical graduations this year, because we all enjoy that. We enjoy watching the young people walk across the stage. We enjoy their energy when they toss their hats and the regalia. We enjoy that, but we also want them to be safe and their families to be safe. So the staff brought to the board the concept of the virtual graduation. But as Dr. Williams said, and I'm hoping that it will come to fruition, that we will be able to have that real, that physical opportunity to congratulate our seniors, and to give them that send-off that they certainly deserve to have. But we certainly did not want to sit around and wait and find that we had breached the time and we would not be able to give them any sort of celebration. So we are hoping that we will be able to do something else so that this year they will feel that in the middle of this pandemic, they actually got a twofer, if you will. They got the virtual and then they get something that is going to be physical. So absolutely, this board is working. We're not sitting home. We are working. We are keeping things afloat. We're making sure that when schools open, we will be able to continue the work that our children certainly deserve.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, for that overview and explanation as to all the hard work that the school board is putting in, during these challenging times. I do have a few questions for you. One is, with the need to turn to virtual education very quickly and comprehensively, it's brought added focus to the fact that there's a digital divide in the county, as there is in many jurisdictions. Not every student has a laptop at home, and not everyone has access to the internet at home. And I know that Dr. Williams talked about accessing resources for the summer and for the fall, but I guess I wanted to ask that for the spring, which I realize is ending soon, but has the school system been able to provide laptops or internet access to families that otherwise don't have access for them, so they can participate in the distance education?
Sure, thank you. And certainly that is a major question. That is a question that we get often. We get it from those who don't have children, and we certainly get enough communication from parents. And one of the things that we found out early on that was really important, when we thought about the laptops, the Chromebooks, for example, we knew that our older students had theirs. So we anticipated that they would, in most ways, be covered. We looked at our younger ones, our grades 3 to 5, realizing that because the first wave of closings happened so suddenly, the Chromebooks we weren't able to detach them quickly from the ports. So they were a little later going out. Then we realized that we wanted to be able to address even our younger students. And the other piece that became very clear is that even though students had may have had a laptop or Chromebook, and they thought that possibly that would be enough, or the younger ones, we won't need one because they're in a household that has that have PCs and computers. When parents realized that they were working from home, that meant that all of that technology was being used up. So what we found is that we were going to have to send out even more computers than we had anticipated initially. Then the next piece, which was very important, is the realization that you might have a device, but if you don't have the Wi-Fi to go with it, then it is certainly a moot point. We realized that when schools closed, libraries closed, there weren't even places for children who didn't have that kind of technological accoutrement in their own homes. They didn't have any place to go. So then we realized that we were going to have to build in terms of hotspots. Where can the children go? So as of this month, we are going to see an increase because that has been a real issue for us. So somewhere around 4,000 hotspots will be added so that our students will be able, who don't have that, will be able to go online. And the good news is that through Title I, we will be able to pay for the connectivity for all of our young people, not just students who have been in Title I schools. That's the good news. So we will be able to embrace them. We know that also they can access some hotspots or internet connections at our libraries. But remember that if the schools aren't open, the libraries aren't open. But what we do know is that around our schools and our libraries, students will be able, it's not optimal, certainly not. We really don't want them to have to hang around on the outside of a building, but we know that that can happen. And it is a good thing. We know that our schools have it. And I have to say from personal experience, because when you want to change your password or anything on a BCPS computer, you have to be in a BCPS facility. So I've sat on the campus at Greenwood to take care of things like changing my password. So those things are out there, but we are looking at those hotspots for those children who don't have that connectivity as we speak through a number of reasons. I hope I've touched on much of what you wanted.
Yes, very much so. No, very good to know. Next question goes to sort of the mental health needs of students. You know, we know that teachers have been under a lot of stress, and they deserve, you know, a huge shout out from us all for the way they've, you know, quickly pivoted to provide distance education, you know, across the school system very quickly. But students, you know, this has been very disruptive for students as well. And, you know, sometimes when students go through any sort of major difficult change, it's hard for them. So especially given the fact that they don't have access to the counselors who are at schools, how has BCPS been able to help with the mental health or psychological needs that some students might have?
Sure. And that, again, is another excellent question, because we don't believe that the students are home, and even with the work that they have, that they're not feeling the shift, that they are losing a level of their socialization, the way they see their friends during the course of the day. And also understanding that parents need that kind of support as well, because everything is very different for them. Now they've become the teacher. We may see on Facebook all of the jokes about parents now that they're the teachers, but at the end of the day, it really is not that funny. So they are struggling as well with trying to make sure that they are doing their very best. Dr. Williams pointed out that our teachers, many of our teachers have children themselves. So it's a balancing act for them. How do I teach my students and give them the social emotional support that they need, but at the same time, and for real, literally, at the same time, I'm trying to support my children as they are doing this virtual instructional mode. So it's wonderful that our counselors are out there. They are not quiet. They are not still. They are on point and working. Our pupil personnel workers, our social workers, they are still addressing needs of students, staff members, and I anticipate, and I think that Dr. Williams again has spoken to that. Certainly we've spoken about this on the board, that as part of re-entry, we must be considering how we offer the helpers help first, because they're gonna need support,
Right.
so that they are able to offer the support to our children and our teachers and our administrators. This is major, and it's a major component that we as staff and as board members are going to have to consider, that everyone, and I repeat, from the helpers, are going to need support. And my cat just jumped up to offer me support here. That's going to be a major consideration. And I do believe that the state will offer us some respite with that as well, because that is, now we're talking some funding, additional funding, and federal supports as well.
Okay, great. Another question is a follow-up to your statement that the Board of Ed has set up an equity committee, which is great to hear. And my question is there any concern that with the focus on trying to adapt to this new learning environment, and I realize, Dr. Williams said that I guess the future in the fall of what education will look like, whether it's a couple days a week or fewer students per classroom, that's all to be decided. But is there concern that the important focus of equity will somehow get lost or diminished with the fact that there are so many new dynamics to this, that are created by the pandemic?
I'm gonna just jump in right on that and say that the concept of equity can't get lost, because equity will undergird everything that is happening. That we're not equity, it's a misnomer if one thinks that equity is talking about either race or gender, etc. We are also talking about what is right and orderly in terms of how we see our children and what is going to work for them. For example, Dr. Williams and I have had this conversation about, let me back up, let me take out about, and say, how do the children get to school? So we have a plan about what the school day looks like, but they have to get there first, right? So now we're talking transportation. So they can't sit 2 by 2 anymore. We're now going to have to rethink that from the point at which they leave home. What is equitable? What do we mean in terms of how we're going to get them there, even before they're there, and we figure all of that out? It means, the equity means, what are we going to give our students in terms of instruction that does not ignore any population? Again, Dr. Williams pointed out our GT programs, our advanced placement programs, our IB programs. Those students still must have that high level of instruction. They can't be shortchanged. But on the other hand, we cannot must not, and we will not shortchange those who have learning disabilities, physical disabilities. So you see how equity comes into play with all of it. So it can't get lost. We cannot lose our children who have those disabilities, that have those IEPs, that have those needs that require certain accoutrements or certain levels of support in terms of the classroom. That's equity. That all really does mean all, that we are giving all of the children exactly what it is they need. And I will throw out there, and I think Dr. Williams would agree, that we have to think differently. Not just are we looking at populations where people are experiencing homelessness, and experiencing homelessness does not mean that they're all in a shelter. It might mean that they're moving constantly from one place to the other, that they are living with someone else. But understand that those children who left us in March, who might well have been behind in March, we know where they're going to be when we re-enter. So how do we equitably make sure that we are doing what is best for them so we can catch them up? And if I may, that I want to segue into saying that the summer program, Dr. Williams said, what we do in the summer is going to carry us into what we do re-entry in the fall, whichever part of the fall it might be. So the curriculum and instruction folks have two things going on called targeted and universal. So the targeted would be our regular summer school, as people already know it. Universal is going to work with those students who have other needs that have surfaced during this, because remember, teachers are looking at the work of the children. And for those parents who are out there who are saying, I got packets and packets were late, et cetera, the instruction is predicated on the notion that the system is going to give children whatever they need wherever they are. So even if the work is turned in late and they have to screenshot it or whatever that terminology is, I'm an old woman, so I don't know, but you know what I mean. They do it and they send it to the teachers. It won't matter whether it's 2 weeks behind other children. The teachers are going to take them where they are. So for that reason, Baltimore County is going to start introducing what happens in the summer in the next week or so, so that teachers have an opportunity to share with students and parents what's going to be happening through the summer. They're going to explain to them where they can go on the website to find answers, where they can find support. So the regular summer school, or targeted, is from what I think it's the month of July. And yes, the month of July. And they will automatically have teachers assigned to them, whether it's virtual or real. Those who are in the universal, that is to pick up and try to assess those who might not be in regular summer school, but who know that they have some needs. Their parents know they have some needs. The teachers know they have some needs. Now, theirs might well be virtual, but there will also be an opening, if possible, and that will be state mandated, of course, if possible, maybe to have that one-on-one. But if it is not physically one-on-one, then arrangements will be made so they can at least go to their tablets or laptops and talk to a teacher about things they're missing. Great.
No, it's terrific to hear about the continued focus on equity and achievement. And I guess my last question is just, it's in response to a Facebook question we got. It concerns the different protocols, health protocols, hand washing, sanitizer, and practices for how students will be sitting in the classroom. I take it that all those details are still being worked out at this point, and there really isn't anything close to being decided. in terms of those types of protocols. Is that right?
I would say that's fair. Would you agree, Dr. Williams? Yes.
So I would agree, yes, the state board shared a recovery plan guidelines, and we still have to work with our health department and following the CDC guidelines. And so we have to look at all of those logistics around the best thing is hand washing, but we got to look at hand sanitizers, the hand washing, building that into schedules, sizes of classes, if we're going to have small, all of those logistics. Every county, I'm sure every state is looking at those logistical issues to try to be prepared as we move through the different phases of the reopening. Right now we're in phase 1. What phase 2 will bring about some nuances, and then phase 3, whenever that may happen. So like I said, we have to look at if we're 100% remote or partial or all returning back to our school building and offices. A lot of logistical work that we have to look at.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Williams. And Cheryl, thanks for that great discussion and all this important updates that you provided. And most of all, thanks for your lifelong dedication to students in Baltimore County. We're all the better for it.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Sure. You're very welcome. And next, we'll hear from Bruce Harris, who is a board member of the Baltimore County Board of Elections, who will provide us with important information regarding next week's primary election. Bruce?
Thank you, Delegate Stein. I want to thank Senator Heddleman, Delegate Cardin, and Delegate Balcastro for inviting me here. I'm honored to be in the distinguished company of Superintendent Williams and School Board Member Pasteur. I do appreciate the opportunity to talk about one of my passions, elections. So hi, I'm Bruce Harris. I'm a member of the Baltimore County Board of Elections. And let me start by talking about the methods to submit a ballot and where to vote. So there are 3 ways to submit a ballot. Number 1, you can mail it in, and this will be the first election where the majority of the ballots will come through the mail. Number 2, you can drop it in a drop box. We'll talk more about that. Or you can vote in person on election day. So to start off, let's talk about mail-in. So if you've gotten, hopefully the majority, vast majority, 99% of people in the county have received their ballot already, you want to fill out your ballot, choose your candidates, put it in the election envelope that was received, sign the oath on the back of the envelope, print your name under that and date it, and then walk it over to the mailbox. It's pretty simple. No postage is necessary. The postage has been prepaid, and your envelope must be postmarked by next Tuesday, June 2nd. You'll see at the top of the ballot, when you look at the ballot itself, the election says that it's April 28th, but please disregard that. That was the plan before this pandemic struck, and the election was changed to June 2nd. So the important thing is to get it in the mailbox by June 2nd. Now, mail-in is the most safe and convenient way to vote, so we do urge everyone to mail in your ballot. Now, if you'd like to use a drop box instead, we have 5 locations around Baltimore County, and here's where they are. There's one in front of the Baltimore County Elections Office in Hunt Valley, Maryland, one in front of each of the 4 locations where people would be able to vote in person. And one of those is the Arbutus Recreation Center, Honeygo Run Community Center, Martin's West, and Solars Point Multi-Purpose Center, as is shown on the screen. And the address of Baltimore County Board of Elections is also shown on the screen. So the drop boxes are available 24/7. They're open now. You can come by day or night, just drop off your ballot in the box. The boxes are locked and secure. Election staff does drive over at least 2 or 3 times a day and pick up all the ballots and bring them back to the election office. And you can use that drop box until 8 p.m. on election day, June 2nd. After that, it'll be locked and trucked out of the way. It won't be able to be used anymore. For in-person voting, you can again vote next Tuesday, June 2nd. We open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. at those 4 polls. Now, in-person voting, was designed for people that haven't received a ballot in the mail. It's your last chance to actually vote, so you can go there. And it's designed for those who have disabilities that prevent them from voting through the mail. So for example, if a voter is blind or visually impaired, or doesn't have the capability or manual dexterity to hold a pen, we have electronic ballot marking devices, and that allows people to vote. If you are blind or have vision problems, you can listen on headphones to verbal instructions. It names the candidates, and you can push a button for the person you want to vote for. And it has a touch screen for anybody else that wants to choose their candidates. So while we prefer for health and safety reasons that everyone, if possible, vote by mail, anyone that wants to vote in person may do so on election day. Now, I'd like to recommend if you do vote on election day, please thank the poll workers, also known as election judges. They're serving long hours at the polls. It's a very difficult time for them. It was hard to get poll workers to actually come out and vote due to the risk of seeing so many people come through. So give them your thanks and a tip of the hat, because they deserve it. Now let's talk about the process for counting your vote. Each day, the Baltimore County Election Office in Hunt Valley receives trays full of mail-in ballots and also the envelopes from the drop boxes. But all the mail is quarantined for 12 to 24 hours. And then the next day, they're assigned to election staff to look up on the election database. They look up every voter and look to see, make sure they haven't voted already, and they've given them credit for voting in the current system. So they do see if someone already voted and they're voting again, they'll pull that aside, and we'll talk about what happens with that later. But the goal is to track everybody and make sure that we count the fact that they voted. And then the ballots are batched in groups of 50, and they're ready for the election canvass. So for this election, the canvass started last Thursday, May 21st, and the people work 6 days a week. It's regular staff and people hired for this process. We worked over election day, Memorial Day as well. The election office has already processed and scanned over 87,000 ballots that have come in to the office so far. And I saw another 10,000 came in to the mail today. So this is an ongoing process. And this will continue going until June 12th. So election day is June 2nd. For the next 10 days after that, people will still be counting and processing and scanning every single vote, because every vote counts, every vote will be tabulated and reported on. Now the team of people that are opening each envelope also, they unfold the ballot, they get it ready for the scanning. Another group of staff feeds them into the scanners. They tabulate the votes just like voters do on election day. And they really watch the counts, make sure every batch is counted perfectly to verify the integrity of the count. I should note that the voting equipment is run through pre-election, election logic and accuracy testing to make sure that every machine works perfectly. Now, when they open up the envelopes and look at the ballot, they look for irregularities. Maybe someone wrote a note on the ballot, or they filled in multiple ovals and crossed out some names or crossed out the ovals, and it's confusing, and the machine won't tabulate it properly, or if the name is signed on the ballot. Anything that's not standard goes before the board, and the board makes a decision, meeting regularly throughout the process, making a decision of whether the vote gets counted at all, and if so, who gets credit for that vote. So we follow the Maryland regulations and COMAR, as well as guidance from the State Board of Elections on how to count a vote. Now, every step of the canvass, opening the ballots, scanning the ballots, the board review decision meetings, it's all live streamed, it's recorded, and citizens can watch it online in real time. As a matter of fact, if a citizen is watching us make a decision on a ballot and they want to challenge that decision, they can go online, fill out the challenge form, email it within an hour to the election director, and the board will review that ballot decision and decide whether to overturn it or not. And actually this week we already had one citizen who did that, went online and decided they wanted to challenge one of the decisions that the board made. So it's all very transparent. Everything is shown on the screen. They try to hide the name of the voter, but you can show the vote if there are discrepancies on who voted, what the vote was for. Let me also take a moment to acknowledge the leadership of Katie Brown, the director of the Baltimore County Board of Elections, and her dedicated staff. They've been working around the clock for weeks and probably months, preparing for the election, overseeing and processing all the votes. So they really do a remarkable job, and they're a model for running an accurate and efficient election. And they've gotten kudos statewide and awards for their job. So we should be proud of them in Baltimore County. Now let me give you some quick hints on how to ensure that your vote is counted. Because each election, a number of ballots are rejected, so don't let this happen to you. Let me tell you some hints. And number one, be sure to sign the oath on the envelope. Print your name underneath and date it. Many ballots are rejected because people didn't sign the oath. They don't even look inside to see who the ballot was for. If there's no signed oath, the ballot goes in a reject pile. That's the law. Number two, don't sign the ballot itself. Elections are supposed to be confidential, and the regulations tell us to reject an identifiable ballot. Some recent television ads from candidates and some emails mistakenly said to sign and date your ballot. That is wrong. Sign the oath and not the ballot itself. Very important. Number three, this sounds silly, but when you mail back the ballot, be sure to put the ballot in the envelope. You wouldn't believe the number of envelopes that our staff has opened that had the instructions mailed back, but no ballot inside. So it's very sad. We want to count every vote, but we need to get that ballot in our hands. And finally, mail your ballot on time. The ballot must be postmarked by next Tuesday, June 2nd. And be wise. I know that ballot's sitting on your kitchen table. You just haven't gotten to it yet. If you need to do some research on the candidates, do it quickly, get it in the mail, or drop it in your mailbox. We want to make sure it's in on time. Again, after every election, there are ballots that come in, hundreds of them or more, that are untimely because they were postmarked after the date that's required. So June 2nd should be in your mind. Now you may be saying, Bruce, this voting thing sounds like fun, but I'm not registered to vote. How do I register? So let me tell you, the deadline to register to vote is tomorrow, May 27th at 9 p.m. You can go online, do it quickly, and go to the Maryland State Board of Elections website. But you can also register to vote on election day. We now have same day voting. So you can go to one of those 4 in-person polls and register to vote and cast your vote. That'll go in a provisional envelope, be checked in by the staff. If it's your first time voting, you will be asked for ID or some proof of your residency. Look online before you go, make sure you bring the right document. But we do, have that available for you. You can also change your party affiliation by tomorrow, May 27th, and tomorrow's the deadline to change your address in the system. So be quick, go online. Again, you can look at the Baltimore County Board of Elections site or the Maryland State Board of Elections site. Now remember, June 2nd is your primary election. Democrats elect Democrats, Republicans elect Republicans to run in the November general election. So those of the other registered party, in Maryland, the other registered party is Brendan Rose's party, or unaffiliated voters cannot vote in this primary. So I'll just wrap up by saying every vote counts. In 2018, in the gubernatorial Democratic primary election for Baltimore County Executive, out of 85,000 votes, there was only a 17-point difference between first and second place. And 4 years before that, in the Republican primary for Baltimore County Executive, out of 23,000 votes, only 20 votes separated the top 2. That's a pretty tiny number to make a difference. So you may think your vote doesn't count, but it really does. You and your family and your friends who like a candidate may make the difference for that candidate. So go for it.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Really appreciate all of your time and expertise that you're spending with us. If you have a couple questions that have been submitted beforehand, if you don't receive a ballot or haven't gotten it yet, and one of the people in this Zoom that's happened to, who shall remain nameless, what should you do?
The best thing is go to the State Board of Elections website and request a ballot. You can do that actually online by this Friday, May 29th. You'll be given a link where you can print your ballot. So they'll email you a link, print out the ballot. It'll be a paper from your printer. You'll fill in the choices on that paper ballot and mail it in by June 2nd, same deadline to mail it in.
Okay, great. Thank you. What steps are being taken? You talked about giving kudos to the poll workers who are going to be in the centers on election day. Can you talk a little bit about what precautions are going to be taken for both the workers and people who might need to vote in person on June 2nd?
That's a great question, thanks. So each of the 4 polls, again, Arbutus, Honeygove, Martins West, and Solars Point, will be designed for voters to walk in one door and exit another. So we want to protect the voters as well as the poll workers, and all of these things I'm going to mention are designed to protect both of them. If they stay on the path, they won't be face-to-face with other voters, so voters come in one way and leave another. Each poll worker will have a mask, and we'll have enough masks actually on hand to provide any voter that doesn't bring one. Some poll workers will also have face shields to protect us. There'll be plexiglass table shields at each table where voters check in. And then we're going to give a pen to every voter to fill out their ballot, and the pen is theirs to keep. We don't want it back. We don't want to give it to another poll worker or other voters. They'll take that pen. The pen is courtesy of the Census Bureau. They handed out those pens, and it'll say census on there, but we thank them for that. There'll also be gloves galore at every poll. Hand sanitizer spray will be available for people to come in, the poll workers and the voters, if they want to spray their hands, as well as used for cleaning the tables and equipment, which will be cleaned on a regular basis throughout the day. Now, the ballot marking devices where people vote on, the machines, will be wiped and sanitized after every single use. So that's a protocol we're making sure is in effect. Now, when voters are handed their ballot, it usually goes in a folder, like a manila folder, that's called a privacy sleeve. So once they vote, it protects who they voted for, and no one can see it until it slides into the machine. So that sleeve will be a one-time use sleeve. They'll discard it in the box when they're finished. We won't throw them away. We will quarantine them and use it for the November election. But each voter will get a new one every time they vote. We're limiting each voting room to a maximum of 10 people, and that includes poll workers and voters. So we'll have a handful of each in the room. And there are going to be people at each poll performing line management to make sure the people that are in line and the people that are available and ready to vote get in and out as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Great. It sounds like there are quite a lot of precautions being taken. What happens if someone mistakenly votes by mail and votes in person at a voting center? So can you talk a little bit about what would happen then?
Sure. Thank you, Senator. If someone's ballot was mailed and processed, and then they go to the polling place and try to vote again, the election judge will see that their name will be noted that they already voted, and they will let them know. So the poll books are updated in real time as soon as someone votes or as soon as a ballot is received in the office and processed. So some people do forget. They might have voted a few weeks ago when they got the mail to their house, and now it's election day coming up, they think, I need to vote again. So if that happens, the election judge will let them know that they already voted. And that's the same with people who may have sent in a ballot and requested a second ballot, and they try to vote twice. That second ballot will be caught in the election process because the name will show in the database that they already voted, and it'll show as a duplicate and be rejected. So you really can't vote twice with the same name because it's being checked. Every attempt at double voting, any combination of in-person or mail-in, is sent to the Attorney General's office to investigate, and they determine whether they want to prosecute the voter for attempting to vote twice. And this is an offense that we do take seriously.
Okay, thank you. When can we expect results? I know you said that there's going to be a 10-day period after June 2nd, from June 2nd to June 12th, to count all of the ballots. But when do you think we're going to start hearing reports of the results?
Right, so the 87,000 votes that have already been tabulated are on memory sticks, and they're being held securely in the election office. And each day until June 2nd, the group will continue processing all the ballots that are being received. The night of June 2nd at 8 p.m., they will release the results to date that have been processed and scanned. They will continue the next day, taking the memory sticks from the polls, plugging them in. They're going to be, as well, the memory sticks of the polls will be quarantined for a day. Then they'll be plugged in and tabulated, as well as all the ballots that are received after June 2nd, but postmarked by June 2nd for the next 10 days. And then the final results will be at the end of that process, the night of June 2nd. I'm sorry, the night of June 12th will be the final. But we will have the preliminary results of everybody that voted until then, June 2nd, election night, 8 p.m., when the polls close.
So like a normal election in person.
Right.
Somebody can
Right.
tune into local news that night and hear the reports and the returns.
Right, I'm sure 1 minute after 8, the news reports will come out as to who won every race, and we'll be back in the office counting for the next 10 days to get the exact numbers.
And making any corrections if there need to be, right?
Right, and the interesting thing is not only are votes being cast now for Congress and president and some judges and things like that, but the delegates to the Democrat and Republican convention are being cast. Some of those races have a good number of people running. So these ballots that are coming in for the next couple weeks after the election may make a difference because it's a lot of people splitting a good number of votes.
Right.
So those are really important for people to remember to vote for too. Choose your delegates to the conventions.
Great, thank you. We did have a question that came online. What's being put in place to help people vote who speak another language?
So Baltimore County does not have translated ballots. Montgomery County does. They have more money than us. But it's not something, we know that, I mentioned when we had polls in place, there are certain polls that we did have, for example, at Millbrook Elementary in the Northwest area. There was a large Russian-speaking population, and there was usually a Russian-speaking poll worker to be there to help people. But I can say that the best thing to do if someone speaks another language the person helping can fill out their name and who they assisted in the date and sign it so that assistance was given to that person.
And those forms are going to be available on election day at those sites that you mentioned?
So their they're a part of every mailed in ballot. So when you got a ballot in the mail, it should have an assistance form with that.
Right.
And people either use it or they, and send it in, or they don't if they don't use it.
Right, I saw that when I returned my ballot, but will those forms can someone come with an assistant if they are voting in person in second?
The request is not to bring anyone else to the polls. They want to limit the number of people in the polling places. So usually that's frowned upon. I don't know what the regulation is. It's something we could look up and share that information later.
Sign that assistant form, correct?
I'm sorry, I lost your voice. Could you repeat that, please?
Sorry, if somebody needs help with translation, that they should get
That assistant.
Shelley, I think you're breaking up on everybody.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, can you hear me now?
Now I can.
Okay. Okay, we'll just move on. What I was saying is if someone has language needs, that they should really get an assistant and mail in. I don't know if I'm still breaking up, but I'm going to toss it back to John. Thank you so much, Bruce, for all of the information you provided tonight and for all of your hard work on the Baltimore County Board of Elections during this difficult time. And I'm going to toss it back to Delegate Cardin. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Senator Hedelman. And I just think that you were covering up your microphone. It wasn't technical. And to Delegate Stein, thank you very much. And to Delegate Belcastro, we all send our condolences on your recent loss and sorry that you couldn't be with us. to all the speakers who joined us. Thank you, Dr. Williams, Cheryl Pasteur, and Bruce Harris. You guys were both enlightening and comprehensive, and we appreciate that. And I just wanted to open up to Delegate Steiner or Senator Heddleman if you have any last thoughts.
I'll just say as well, thank you to our distinguished panelists. And as John just mentioned, Delegate Belcastro, who's an educator herself, really regrets not being able to be here tonight because of her family loss. But with that, thanks to everyone who joined us.
I'd just like to echo my thanks and send my condolences to our colleague, Delegate Belcastro also. We are going to share screens right now of contact information. If anybody who's watching would like to follow up and connect with any of our panelists tonight and get additional information about the election and about how we are going to transition our education system going through the summer and in the fall in response to our pandemic, please reach out to any of us and any of the panelists. Thank you again for attending tonight.
Okay.